Today, we're doing something really exciting. We are going to take some pretty dense sociological concepts, mix them with highly actionable career frameworks, and basically build you a complete blueprint for compounding personal success. We're talking insights from sociology, personal finance, venture capital, and mental models, all stitched together to give you a step-by-step strategy for an asymmetric life. All right, let's dive right in.
First off, we need to confront a massive, incredibly persistent myth. You know the one? The idea of the perfectly meritocratic, completely linear career path. From day one, we're told that if you just work hard, keep your head down, do exactly what you're told, boom, you'll naturally climb the ladder to success. But I want you to stop and really consider how the world actually works. Is the playing field truly level? Or are there hidden forces pulling the strings, deciding who actually gets ahead?
Well, the answer lies in something called the Matthew effect. Sociologists Robert K. Merton and Harriet Zuckerman coined this term way back in 1968. They were originally looking at why famous scientists get way more credit than unknown ones for doing the exact same work. And what they proved was a universal tendency. Early leads compound over time. It's essentially the scientific proof of the old saying, the rich get richer. And this applies to everything. Whether we're talking about scientific citations, followers on social media, or dollars in your bank account, those initial advantages, they multiply.
So, how do we actually use this? Here's our agenda for this explainer. First, the law of accumulation. Second, finding your specific knowledge. Third, stacking your unfair advantages. Fourth, the bias to action. And finally, playing the long game.
Okay, Section 1, the law of accumulation. Let's look at how cumulative advantage actually operates on a macro level across different industries. When you're planning out your career, investor Graham Weaver points out this super stark contrast between two very different paths. Most people, right, they settle for a linear path. You trade hours for dollars in a standard 9-to-5, you compete on generic skills, and your upside is totally capped. But success in the real world, it's exponential. The ultimate goal here is to shift onto an asymmetric path. Now, in the investing world, asymmetry just means finding opportunities where your potential upside wildly outpaces your potential downside. By shifting your life onto this asymmetric path, you unlock logarithmic growth that blows a traditional linear career completely out of the water.
Section 2. Finding your specific knowledge. To actually escape that linear rat race, you first have to discover your own unique edge. Entrepreneur Naval Ravikant coined this brilliant term, specific knowledge. It is this beautifully weird, highly unique cocktail of your DNA, your upbringing, and exactly how you've responded to the world. You build it by simply leaning into your innate talents and your genuine curiosities. And here's the best part. Because this knowledge is so specific to you, it can't be easily taught in a classroom, which means it can't be outsourced and it definitely can't be replaced by AI. Operating within your specific knowledge gives you massive, massive leverage for one simple reason. Nobody can compete with you on being you. Writer David Perell takes this a step further and calls the packaging of this knowledge a personal monopoly. The internet absolutely loves and rewards differentiation. You build this monopoly by finding a super unusual intersection of your highly specific interests and your authentic personality traits. You kind of have to ignore whatever the current trend is and just share what you're learning openly online. Perell gives a fantastic example of this. Think about a standard third-grade math teacher. They make a linear salary, right? But if that same teacher builds a personal monopoly by teaching math through comedy on the internet, suddenly they've scaled that specific knowledge to millions of people.
All right, before we get too lost in the clouds here, let's do a quick reality check. Based on Cal Newport's research, your absolute first priority shouldn't just be blindly following your passion. Actually, scratch that. Passion is great, but first you have to put in the grueling work of building rare, valuable skills. Newport calls this your career capital. You can't just declare to the world, hey, I have a personal monopoly. No, you have to do the work to become so undeniably good that the market is literally forced to pay attention to you. Excitement, autonomy, passion, those things usually show up at the finish line as a result of hard work and rare skills, not at the starting line.
Moving on to Section 3, stacking your unfair advantages. Once you've identified that specific knowledge, it's time to leverage external circumstances to multiply your success. You know, pop culture usually looks at unfair advantages in a pretty negative light. Just think about all the recent discourse around Nepo babies. But authors Ash Ali and Hassan Kuba completely neutralize this concept in their framework. They empower us to realize a crucial truth. Absolutely everyone possesses unique advantages.
An unfair advantage is really just a condition or an asset that puts you in a favorable position, something you can't easily buy or copy. So the question isn't whether or not you have them. The question is, are you actually identifying and leveraging the ones you already possess?
Designer Dan Mall builds on this so beautifully with what he calls the MILES framework. MILES is an acronym that stands for money, intelligence, location, education, and status. In basically any competitive situation, we're relying on some combination of these to help us win. Take the Nepo baby example again. Sociologically speaking, that simply represents a massive stacking of status and location. Now, you personally might not have endless money, but maybe you have off-the-charts intelligence or a highly specialized education.
And right here is where the real magic happens. Advantages don't just add together, they multiply. Most people out there are relying on just one advantage, right? Like maybe just their formal education. But imagine this scenario. Your work is incredibly excellent, and you happen to have the money to build a custom portfolio, and you just bump into a hiring manager because of your location, and you already have status from a past mentor. When you start stacking these MILES attributes, they compound logarithmically. You immediately stop being just another generic candidate, and you become the completely undeniable choice.
Okay, Section 4, the bias to action. Because let's be real, abstract frameworks mean absolutely nothing without execution. Here is how you trigger that compounding effect.
Take a look at creator Mia McGrath's execution rules. She managed to ditch her miserable 9-to-5 commute and literally made over £100,000 in profit during her very first year as a creator. So, how did she pull that off? Well, she started by writing an anti-vision. Basically, she got brutally, painfully honest about the exact life she desperately wanted to avoid. From there, she picked one entirely self-directed goal, turned a personal obsession into a hard skill, and forced herself to act way faster than she actually felt ready to. And maybe most importantly, she completely stopped treating mistakes as personal flaws and just started collecting her failures as raw data. Now that is some serious high-agency action.
But to take that kind of action, you really have to conquer your own psychology first. Investor Graham Weaver tells this crazy story about a college 2,000-meter rowing test. Over 6 months of absolutely brutal daily training, he managed to shave 20 seconds off his time. But here's the wild part. 10 of those 20 seconds were gained in just the first 2 weeks. That wasn't some sudden superhuman leap in physical strength. It was purely psychological. He literally just had to learn how to get comfortable with being incredibly uncomfortable.
Which brings us to this seriously powerful quote from Weaver. Everything you want is on the other side of worst first. Think about it. Any meaningful change in your life, quitting a secure job, starting a new business, ending a toxic relationship, or even just sitting down to have a really tough conversation, it always requires a temporary dip in comfort. You are going to go through a period where things feel significantly worse before you ever reach that beautiful, asymmetric upside. You just have to accept the worst first if you want to get to the growth.
Finally, Section 5, playing the long game. You've found your edge, you've stacked your advantages, and you've taken the painful action. Now you have to sustain it.
Weaver shares this genuinely fascinating formula for compounding competence. X equals 1 plus R, all raised to the power of N. Now, R represents your rate of improvement, things like reading, learning, getting coaching. But the absolute most powerful variable in this entire equation, that's N, the number of years you actually spend doing it. Back during the dot-com boom, Weaver decided to buy what his classmates laughed at as stupid label printing companies. Why? Because he genuinely loved the work. And because he loved it, his N could stretch on for decades. Listen, if you truly love what you do, you're going to stick with it long enough to become the absolute best in the world.
The legendary football coach Vince Lombardi captured this idea so perfectly. He once said, "The Green Bay Packers never lost a football game, but on a few occasions, we ran out of time." I just love that. If you are hitting an obstacle at absolute full power, and you are the one controlling the game clock, there is practically nothing that won't eventually yield to you. Time and sustained, relentless effort, those are your ultimate multipliers.
So, bringing this whole shebang together, here is your actual blueprint. First, your foundation. That's your specific knowledge, which creates your completely unique value proposition. Next, your multipliers. Those are your stacked MILS advantages, giving you exponential leverage. Then, the catalyst, high agency action, which is what pushes you right through that dreaded worst first dip. And finally, the duration, decades of sustained effort. When you combine all of these elements, you are virtually guaranteeing yourself an asymmetric life. So, where do you even start right this second? Well, Graham Weaver points out that we constantly let fear disguise itself as just being practical.
To fight that, you have to write a brand new story. Step 1, describe your life 5 years from now in incredibly vivid detail. Step 2, picture that exact outcome as if you knew with 100% certainty that you could not fail. And step 3, and guys, this is the most critical part, ignore the how completely for now. Seriously, the how is the absolute killer of great dreams. Just sit down and methodically write out your wildly aspirational story.
We have seen how early advantages compound, how your specific knowledge completely sets you apart, and how stacking your unique assets while playing the long game creates logarithmic success. But at the end of the day, it all starts with a single choice. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Take a hard look at your life right now. What is your anti-vision? What is that life you desperately want to avoid? And more importantly, what new asymmetric story are you going to start writing today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep building, and I'll see you next time.